Welcome back to the sideline. I'm Rory Jones, and today I'm delighted to be joined by a very special guest, the National Football League's head of Europe, Brett Gosper. So today's guest, he's been in the role since January 2021, after previously serving as the chief executive of World Rugby, a newly created position for the NFL. So first of all, Brett, welcome to the sideline. It's a pleasure to speak with you this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So naturally, this interview comes at a very, very interesting and significant time for the NFL. After a historic breakthrough last week, where it was announced that the league will be expanding its number of international games from 4 to 8 per season from 2025. This was agreed at the annual ownership meeting in Irving, Texas. So, first of all, Brett, massive news. How will this impact the league going forward? And what can we expect to see from the NFL's expanded international series?
Yeah, it's great news for the league and for particularly international fans that will be seeing more direct games in their markets. So it's quite a big step. It was already a big step to have that rotating 4 games a year compulsory that all teams were going to come through during the 8 years at some point and play a game in international. I think the fact that this is so early in that program, we're really only 2 years in. For this to be stepped up to double the number is an indication of how important international is to the league and how the ambitions to continue reinforcing our image and business as a global sports property is critical to commissioner and ownership. So it was great news, and it came through which with virtual unanimity. I think there was one club that wasn't supportive of the 32. So a pretty resounding result in that sense. And it will mean that more countries will see more games as the simple equation. And that tangible dimension of a game, and it's not just about the games themselves, is what that game triggers in other connections and other activities in those markets, as we've seen very positively recently with a new market like Germany. When I say new, I mean new to regular season games, how that triggers so much around it that helps us grow our fan base and our business in those markets.
You mentioned that more countries will see more games. It seems like the next on the list at this stage is Brazil. Obviously, another huge development to come out of this meeting. There's a lot of interest in terms of hosting games in various overseas countries, but it was clear that Brazil and Spain were kind of both leading that charge for the next country to host a game. Why was Brazil ultimately selected? What can we expect to see there with the first game in Sao Paulo next year?
We like to go to markets where there's a good, strong fan base, where we know that it's going to be well received by the fan base in those markets, that our marketing efforts in the past will culminate in games such as this. Brazil is good time zone friendly with the United States. There's a very big audience there of total fan numbers and avid fan numbers. There's also a strong broadcast market, sponsorship market, and so on. So there are fan and commercial elements that are well in place. I think also the fact that we are going to a new continent for the first time for a regular season game is attractive because it does resonate and make a lot of impact outside of the market that we're going to as well. So for all of those reasons, Brazil was chosen. We do believe that Spain is also a very strong market to move games to. We've looked at other markets like France in Europe as well, and there are other possibilities over time of looking at other markets in Europe or outside of Europe. We quite like the time zone that Europe offers as well. If we talk about some of the European time zones and so on, that 9:30 kick Eastern time in the United States is a great window both into the States but also in other parts of the world like Asia. So playing these games in other markets, it also has a knock-on to markets outside the markets that you play the games in, and that's important to us.
So Spain as well being kind of almost unlucky in a sense to have missed out this year, but it has been reported the NFL has held talks with I think it was Madrid City Council over potentially staging a game there. although they've missed out this year, do you think it's quite likely that we might see a game in Spain in the coming years, especially with the expanded international schedule now
Well, I
as
think with
well?
this new inventory, it's highly likely that we would be in Spain in the near future. We're working our way through what those possibilities are with the city of Madrid and stadium host contenders and so on. So um, nothing to announce at this point, but we're certainly working on follow up years to the Brazil opening up as well. You know, we've got to be also sure that we're not just flirting one year with the city and then leaving. You know, strategically, it's good for us to enter a market and keep working that market as we've done in London over a long number of years, as we've committed to do also in Germany with a number of games through the future in Germany as well. So while there's rising inventory, there's also a rising commitment to those markets that we're present in.
So I believe the agreement you have with Germany, the original one, I think it runs until 2025. And obviously we've got the additional Munich game announced as well for next year. It seems clear though that the NFL has much sort of longer term plans in terms of opening a new office in Dusseldorf, and it definitely, seeing the impact of the Frankfurt games this year, there's clearly a huge market. Would you be able to outline sort of why Germany is such an important market for expansion?
I think it's important for a number of reasons. It's an important market because it's an important market for a start, in the sense it's important in size. It's is as big, if not bigger, than the UK market on fan criteria, consumer products, our streaming Game Pass, International Game Pass International. Um, Television rights are pretty similar across the two markets and so on. The fan base is actually bigger in Germany, but with a very high uh, growth spurt that is happening over the last 3 to 4 years, which has been very apparent. So it is a market that has a deep connection with the sport and a great love for the sport. We have great partners in that market, which helps as well. In the past, it's been DAZN. Now it's RTL, and so it's in the past been actually ProSieben, and we've been working with DAZN and RTL more recently to help grow that market. And all of those partners have been very strong with us in helping to grow our fan base. So yeah, it's an important market because it's a market that's giving us great return on the investments we're making, and there's no sign of that stopping anytime soon. We could put a number of games in that market clearly with no problem, and we're committed for the next number of years to take games back there. So yes, we're at Bayern Munich next year, which is great. A return to Munich, and then back to Frankfurt after that.
Yeah, no, it's certainly interesting. I think seeing this year's the fanfare around this year's two games in Frankfurt it looked pretty extraordinary. What were sort of some of your main takeaways from that? Obviously, the first time the NFL has brought games to Frankfurt, it's a new city. Saw two fantastic matchups as well, particularly the first game. I think that broke the viewership record as well for an international game in terms of the US audience. You mentioned that being a time zone that works particularly well for that. But what were sort of some of your main reflections on those two first games in Frankfurt?
Yeah, I mean, the atmosphere in those games is incredible. The way that those games take over the city, firstly Munich and then Frankfurt, and these cities are slightly smaller size, obviously, than London, and therefore they don't just make a dent in a city; they actually take the city over in an incredibly positive way. Everyone gets into the spirit, and that spirit that is then taken inside the bowl for the games. You know, the footprint around the stadium and in the central city, the excitement is very apparent. But then in the games themselves, there's a very unique atmosphere. Certainly in Germany, that atmosphere is not mirrored in Bundesliga games or otherwise. It's a very different feel and a very different atmosphere. Everyone tells us that, and it's a very enlightened crowd. They're making noises in the right places, but there's a joyous, festive atmosphere that you get in Germany because of the fact that these games are so rare. Again, in England, we get that as well with the London games, but there seems to be an excitement because of the novelty factor in Germany and that great love and connection with the game that there is in Germany. Remember, back in NFL Europe days, most of the clubs were coming out of Germany. It was almost the German league itself. The European League of Football that's currently there is mainly German teams as well. There's a high player base. There's a high penetration of flag in that market. Um, this is a very strong all-round American football market. So the welcoming of those games is very emotional, very passionate, and just great to see, and strikes a unique atmosphere for the game.
Certainly seems that way. I think really exciting as well to have the game again next season at the Allianz Arena. I think obviously since you took over the role as well in 2021, it seems like Germany has really been the NFL in Germany's taken off in terms of bringing games there to start with, and then just kind of expanding that market. Is that kind of a large part of what you do in your role, I suppose, in terms of just kind of driving that growth in Germany as you've mentioned, like a really, really important market for you.
Yeah, no, that's a very important part of it. When I came in, I was head of UK and Germany. We've now got a head of the UK, Henry Hodgson, who runs the UK. We've now hired a head, Alexander Steinfuth, in Germany as well, who's hired a team. We have a permanent office now in Dusseldorf, which we opened officially last year, actually this year physically. They were all working from different points in a business centre prior to that and so on. When you have a team on the spot that's focused on that market, lots of things happen, lots of connections are made, marketing happens in a good way, promotion happens in a good way, and relationships and tentpole moments happen throughout the year. And that helps grow our audience. We've seen that also. We've opened an office in Australia. We have a small staff there as well. But again, things happen. Tournaments get set up from a grassroots level in flag football basis. The marketing and teamwork that happens with our broadcast partners is taken to a next level. All sorts of things happen when you have people totally focused on those markets. Germany was already a growth market and doing well. I think our presence there and our focus and our games there has just accelerated that whole process in quite a dramatic way. And we've seen similar growth happening relatively in Australia since we've put a presence there. That's not to say we can open an office in every single place, but certainly where there's substantial inventory and activation possibilities that are going to lead to growth, we would consider doing that.
Yeah. Obviously, seeing just seeing the expansion of the international series as well. I think from it being something that's a regular occurrence in London for quite some time now. You see teams like the Jaguars playing here pretty much every year for I think the best part of the last decade.
Exactly a
But in
decade.
terms of the international games, obviously you're growing the sport, you're building fan bases. What would you identify as the main objectives for the expanding the international schedule, especially now that it's 8 games as well, doubling the amount of fixtures played overseas?
Yeah, look, I think the objective is obviously to gather more interest, more fans, and on the back of that, the business will grow. Um, it's also important we position ourselves as a global sporting property in the competitive environment that there is out there for sports and entertainment. Increasingly, also, a lot of our media will have a more global impact as we move into more streaming services and so on than they will just on domestic broadcast. So it's important for the NFL to take that strong step and ensure that we're very healthy as an offer in markets outside of the United States to grow our to grow our share with some of those global players that are emerging now in the streaming area and so on. So that's one reason. But also we want to be at the top in terms of global rights values across our key markets, and that also anything we can do to help that process and be positioned as a global brand is very helpful. Also, actually, seen back into the States, there is an attraction to a sport which has an influence and an impact outside of the United States by the United States fan as well. So there is a general glow around being a global sports property, even within the domestic market. So that is the intention and the ambition of the league as we move forward.
I think Roger Goodell said something recently as well about trying to make it more of a global sport. I think certainly when you look at some of the NFL's peers, certainly in the US, you see the NBA has had a huge international following for quite some time, and I think MLB obviously having international games as well. I think this year they had the 2 games, but I think when the NFL's looking at kind of exploring new, actually bringing the games to these new cities, these new venues. What are the sort of criteria that the league is really looking at in terms of? I'm sure it would be easy to just pick the biggest stadium or pick the biggest name club based there or anything like that. But what are the main factors for you?
The main factor is that these are markets that in themselves are big sporting markets with potential to grow our fan base in. And secondly, have a media market that can reflect that sporting market, that's a strong advertising and media market where we can have good partners both in a free to air, a pay sense, which tends to be the duality that we operate within. Return on investment in the medium term is also important. We don't want to enter a market where there's not going to be a return on investment for that growth in fans too far out, if at all. So we want to be able to see that it's a healthy broadcast market, healthy advertising market, good sporting fan base, and we survey many markets around the world to ascertain that. Then you get into the viability area. Is there stadium that can really host a game in the right way? And if there is, it's quite good that we have partners where we have some mutual interests in across the world or US or in that host market where we can help them in our home market and they can help us in their home market with our own following across the globe, but essentially in those key markets. So, Tottenham's been a great host for us here in the UK as a football club, as a stadium. We know there was a market here, a very, very strong sports and advertising market and media market. Germany, similarly. We know Brazil has that as well. We know Spain, we know France, we know Australia, and there are other markets across the Middle East, India. Then you get into Southeast Asia where it's slightly more difficult because the time zones aren't as friendly. So you're either building a friendly time zone in the markets where you're hosting the games, you're hoping that also is building a friendly time zone in the domestic market so that you're adding value to your media offer across the world. So all of those things are important, and all of those things are considered when we decide where and if and where we go.
I suppose there's obviously going to be a lot of logistics as well, in regards to the transport links and everything like that.
We tend to talk to the cities as consortia. So we talk to the city, we talk to the region involved, we talk to the stadium and football club, we talk to the media. All of those things come together as a general offer, and it's those cities, regions, countries, and media that seem to be working well together are the ones who position themselves well for games in the future. So, and we're always talking beyond our current footprint. There is a lot more demand in terms of cities offering the possibility to play than there has been inventory, and that's what this change and step up from 4 games to 8 games is trying to do, is address the huge demand there is out there to host NFL games versus the inventory that was on offer. We still won't satisfy that total demand that's out there with the number of cities. And some cities come to the party, a little bit later. Having played in Germany, initially Berlin weren't that interested to get into a pitch situation. They had a lot of inventory of other games, sports, entertainment events, and so on. But having seen what happened in Munich and Frankfurt, Berlin is now quite interested to talk further on the possibility in the future of hosting. And that happens with other cities around the world that contact us and say, well, we'd like to throw our hat in the ring as well. And so we talk to all of these places to ascertain the interest levels and also how they can incentivize the setting up of games in their market, because these are expensive games to put on, logistically difficult, and require a lot of cooperation with cities, clubs, stadia, and so on throughout the world.
You mentioned, I think, one of the countries earlier you said was France as well, being a potential for an international game. I think they joined the Global Markets Program this year as well, with the Saints gaining the rights. So is there anything more you're able to say about that?
The point about the Global Market Program games is those countries that have NFL clubs that have applied for rights to exercise those rights and market their brand in those markets tend to be the countries also that we like to focus on. There's a relationship in the sense that we tend to encourage those teams to market in core strategic markets of ours, but some move into other markets as well, and that gains consideration. We have teams in Ireland, we have a team, as you say, in France, we have teams in Australia, Ghana, um, China, Mexico, and so on. France has the New Orleans Saints, as you say. We've been talking to the Minister of Sport in France and the stadium and so on. The stadium's actually up for a concession license review. And with the Olympic Games there next year, it probably means the ability to host a game wouldn't happen until 26. So we'll look at that possibility and see if that's something that could happen. So that's a consideration among with other markets as to where we would possibly go in 26 with new inventory. And all of that needs to be determined. But France is obviously a very big sports market. We know we've got a good large fan base there. We've got good partners as well in MCIS, as well as other partners there. We'd be in good shape. Be in sport also promoting the game there in France. So you have to have a lot of stars aligning for it to be a very fertile ground for you to take a game to. And France will be one of those markets potentially.
Certainly interesting to see if that materializes in the coming years. Like as you said, I mean, with the increase of inventory as well, it opens up seemingly so many more possibilities for what the NFL can do in its international series.
That's right. It's giving us options, either to go to new markets, but not do that fickly, do that in a way that you retain your strategic presence. But all sorts of things happen in terms of sometimes other clubs are renovating stadia and they decide they're going to play more games internationally. The Jags, there's the Jags factor as well, where they have been playing games in London recently. We can always also add games to existing countries if we feel that's something that's strategic for us at that particular moment in time. But it just gives us a lot of options. Go to new markets, play more games in the existing markets, test other destinations, just test different markets. It's wonderful to have.
I mean, coming back to this year, I mean, the five international games, I think it was incredible to see obviously, again, it was the two at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. We had the one at Wembley with the Jags playing again, as you mentioned, and then we had obviously the two games in Frankfurt. What would you sort of see as some of the main successes of that from this past season?
Well, it was the first time we've done five games in Europe, so that was a first completely. It's the first time a team has played back-to-back games in London, stayed over for the week as an experiment, and that was a successful experiment, certainly from a football point of view, because the Jags won both their games, then went back and won at their home stadium. So it's been successful on that basis. Obviously, it's been successful also because from an operational point of view, we've been able to actually manage the bandwidth of five games in Europe, which is no mean task just from an operations point of view. We've managed to sell out the tickets in all of those places with particular ease. We've also managed to create new records in some of those stadia for attendance, but also, as you said, viewing audiences particularly in Germany and inbound back into the United States. We've set new records as well. So it's been a phenomenal season from that perspective. And I think the experiences of those teams have been incredibly positive as well. Some of them, global market program teams, like in Germany with the Patriots, with the Chiefs and so on, has also been new experiment for them, which have been particularly positive in terms of the connection they've made with fan bases in those markets. So some really good new ground being broken across Europe for that period that I think has helped give the confidence to ownership to go further with more inventory in more countries for the future. I think if we hadn't been as successful in Europe this year, that vote may not have gone the way that it went.
In terms of seeing the teams that have enjoyed the successes as a result of the Global Markets Program, I mean, that was first introduced in 2021. I think it was shortly after you started your role as well, originally as an International Home Marketing Areas Program. But we've seen a number of teams join that as well in the last year. In what ways has that kind of been a game changer for teams looking to build their international fan base?
Yeah, Look, I think it has definitely been a game changer. Look, it's in those markets it at least doubles the noise we're making as a sport in those markets, which is very helpful. But I think it also gives it creates a partnership between the league and the clubs in international in a way that more opportunities are created and that we've all got skin in the game and we're in this together. It used to be the league managing these things on their own and for the benefit of everyone and hoping that things will stick in a good way. And so, but when you've actually got the club partners there working with the fans, working on grassroots flag tournaments, working on watch parties and so on, you get a much deeper connection with the fans. We know that our casual fans are fans of the NFL, but if you're an avid fan, you definitely have a team and you definitely have that deeper relationship. And I think working together with the clubs in these markets and creating those opportunities together, we're 2 to 3 times as effective as we were without the clubs in that program. And they're all taking a long term view of payback. They know this is not something that will just remunerate overnight, but they know this is adding value to their revenues, but also value to their brands over time.
What the Chiefs have been doing in Germany specifically this year as well. I think being one of the four, originally I think it was four teams that had the rights there, and obviously
Correct.
staging the game this year, and they had a number of sort of fanfare events around that. And I think also there was I think they collaborated with German clubs as well. Like just yeah, so it seems there's been a lot of kind of tangible success for teams definitely in their markets.
No, definitely. And the Chiefs have been particularly a good example of all of the different things you can do. They certainly, during that week, did some exciting things. They had rented a hugely branded boat that became a little bit HQ for them, a fan event centre, a hosting and hospitality centre. It was a ship they called the Championship, which only they could call it, given the fact they were current champions or are current champions and so on. So yeah, they've done, and they also had good, strong relationships in Germany. Prior to the global market program actually being launched with Bayern Munich and so on. So they've managed their presence incredibly well in Germany. Always helps to be a world champion, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely convenient timing as well after being the Super Bowl champion. I mean, who knows what they've called it if they didn't win the Super Bowl this past year. But I think just one final question on generally the latest development, I think, in the NFL's international expansion. I think, we've seen the international games first introduced in 2005, I think, in Mexico, the first one, and then in London, the first ever game in 2007, when I think it was the Saints and the Patriots. Now we're kind of entering a new chapter, I guess, with this huge increase. What do you sort of expect us to see in the coming years and in this kind of next stage of the NFL's international expansion?
Well, I think obviously you'll see more games and therefore you'll see more excitement. So I think we need to digest that over the coming years. I mean, again, we've upped this very early on into the period where we're only going to have 4 games a year. And only we're saying now, when we got them, we were incredibly excited about that number. We're excited about 8 now. We need to digest these, demonstrate the value that they're adding to the league, that we're executing well, but that it's actually driving the fan base, the interest, and the broadcast partnerships as well as we'd like them to. And that's going to take a number of years. And hopefully that says to the league we actually could even step up further in the future. I know people love for us to talk about or to react to possibility of a franchise or a division and so on, and maybe that will happen at some point. But certainly, this direction of travel of a higher volume of high quality games into international markets, I think, is going to set the stage for a very strong international future for what is a growing global sports property in the environment. So it's really exciting for NFL fans in particular across the world, and that's what's great.
It's really exciting for me. I can definitely say as an NFL fan myself, it's huge. I think development. I think to see how this evolves as well, and as mentioned, if this can become a more of a global sport, and who knows what the possibilities could be in the future. But Brett, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. Thanks a lot for your time. It's been fascinating talking with you, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. All the best.